Hello and welcome back. My name is Matthew and I'm the C# Artisan, and this is the third video in the Azure Service Bus series. And today we are going to set up a few things on the Azure Portal and then send and receive a message. So our journey into Azure Service Bus is going to begin here in the Azure Portal, where I have clicked on the Create a Resource button, and I'm going to search for Service Bus. Then we'll choose the Service Bus resource, and we'll create one of those. I will give it a resource group, and let's give it a namespace. We'll call it the Artisan Queues, and I'm going to choose the standard pricing tier, which is important. If we choose basic, we can create a queue, we can create queues, but we can't create topics and subscriptions, which I do want to show you later. So standard pricing tier, then review and create. It'll do a little validation and we can click create. Now, while this is deploying, I want to mention that what we're actually creating here is what's called an Azure Service Bus namespace. It's just a container. The namespace is something that holds our queues, our topics, and our subscriptions. And it really creates like a billing unit. It's more of a financial fact than anything else. Okay, so our namespace is complete. The deployment is complete. So now let's go to that resource. And what you'll notice is under entities, you will see queues and topics. So let's go to the queues list and let's create our first queue. And we can just call this test Q1. And I will create that queue accepting all of the defaults. Wonderful. Now we have a queue and you can see there are no active messages. Okay, let's switch over to Visual Studio and write some C# code. So let's create a new project. A console app will work just fine. And we can call this SB test 1. Next, and create. So the first thing we need to do is reference a NuGet package. I'll right-click on Dependencies, Manage NuGet Packages, and let's search for Service Bus. This is the one we want, Azure Messaging Service Bus. So let's go ahead and install that. Great. And now we can reference it in this code unit here. So we'll say using azure.messaging.servicebus. All right, and maybe I'll change this message to say, let's send a message. So the first thing we need to do is connect to our Azure Service Bus namespace using what's called a Service Bus client. And there are two ways to connect, two ways to authenticate. The first way is with a connection string, and the second way is with Microsoft Entra ID. So the second way is recommended, and it is more secure, but the first way is easier. So for today's tutorial, we're just going to go with a connection string. So we can say const string constring equals. So we're going to need to get a value for this connection string. Where can we get that? Let's pop back over to the Azure Portal and let's go to our Artisan Queues namespace. And under properties or under settings, there's this link for shared access policies. So if it's collapsed, just expand that and you'll see shared access policies. And by default, we're given this shared access key. and it will generate something for us, and then we can just copy our connection string. We'll go back here and paste it on in. And now we should, let me make sure I didn't lose my semicolon. Yep, all good. We now have our connection string. The other string we're going to need, and we might as well just take care of it now, is our queue. And we can say, what is the queue name? And we called it test queue1. So with those two pieces of configuration data, we're good to go. So we're going to create a service bus client. And because we're using a connection string, we can just create it straight away like that. There's our client. Now, the next thing we need is a service bus sender. And to create a sender, we'll call client.createSender, and we'll give it the queue name. The next thing we're going to need is a message. So service bus message. And we'll just type in a message. So now we have everything we need to say sender dot send message async, and we'll pass in the message, and then we'll have to wait for it. So this is an asynchronous method. We are not in an asynchronous method here, so we're not going to await. We're just going to call dot wait, which will block until the message is sent. That's just a simple way to take care of that. And then why don't we just go console.writeLine message sent. Let's set a breakpoint right here, and let's test this out. Might take a second to build. Okay, so the console came up on my other screen, and it says, let's send a message. We don't really need the console here. So we create our client, we create our sender, we create our message, and then we send it and wait. And then we can just say, okay, message sent. That's done. We can shut down this app. And now let's go back here to our queues, and let's look at our test queue, and there it is. We have an active message. Right on, we sent a message. All right, what's next? Well, let's receive that message back out. So I'm going to move this stuff down and just comment it out. So normally, your sender and your receiver would be different processes completely. But in this case, just to make a quick illustration, we can just do it all right here. So we're going to turn this into our receiver. So not surprisingly, we are going to create a service bus receiver. And the way you do that is by calling client.createReceiver, and you pass in the queue name. Now, when we receive a message, what we're going to get back is called a service bus received message. And I'm going to call this the message wrapper. And it is the message itself. Well, we'll just call it message, but you'll see it's a little bit more than just the message. So the service bus received message equals receiver dot receive message async, and we'll grab the result from that. Again, it's an asynchronous call, which gives us a task, and by calling dot result, we block, wait for the task to execute, and get the result, which is one of these. So now let's write out a message. So we can say message received, and let's put the body of the message in our console. So message.body, and we have to convert it to string. And I really want that. Is it going to do it? Please. I'm not sure why it is highlighting that in that color. But I'll have to look at that setting. There's something funny happening there. In any case, that should write it out. And now there is one last thing we need to do. And this is a little tricky, maybe counterintuitive, but very important. Now, in older queuing technology, like MSMQ, when you receive a message, you just receive it. It's gone from the queue once you receive it. With Azure Service Bus, it's a little different. When you receive it, it's still in the queue. It is marked that somebody has got it, and it starts a timeout. So if nothing happens and that timeout elapses, the message actually goes back into the queue. So during that time, another client cannot pick it up. It's kind of like it isn't in the queue, but it sort of is in the queue. It's very confusing at first. So what you need to do as the receiver is you need to either complete it or abandon it. There's a variation called sending it to the dead letter queue, but what we need to do here is we need to say receiver dot complete message async and give it the message we want to complete, and we're just going to wait for that to happen. So when we complete the message, that basically tells Azure Service Bus, yes, I actually got it and I'm done with it. And that's what takes it out of the queue. It's a little confusing, but let's watch this happen. Okay, so we will run this and we're going to make our receiver. We're going to receive the message and we can print it out. And here it is in the console. And right now, if I go back to the portal and refresh this, you can see the active message count is still 1. Now, once I complete the message, like that, it's done. Now when I go back and I refresh, the message is actually out of the queue. So those are the basics. Just to review, we set up our namespace, we set up a queue, we wrote some code to create a service bus sender and we sent a message, and then we wrote some code to create a service bus receiver and we received it back out and completed it. And that is your basic Azure Service Bus send and receive.